Well, for a long time, I played the violin from the age of 4 till about 16. And I don't know why the drums sort of came into my world, but they did. And actually, my music teacher dropped a timpani on top of my violin, my antique violin. And with the insurance money, I bought my first drum kit. So actually, I guess, you know, that led to me doing what I'm doing now. But in terms of what inspired me to play, I don't know. I was always tapping, I was always making rhythms and creating rhythms. It always felt quite easy and quite natural, I think. But music was always a part of my childhood. It just sort of morphed into playing drums once I didn't have a violin to play, basically. So for me, obviously I have a lot of influences in terms of the drums, but I also have a lot of sort of broader musical influences. In terms of the drums, in my early days, Charlie Watts, more so than Ringo, but Ringo too. In terms of the pop music that I was listening to, guys like Andy Gangadine, Pete Lewinson, Ian Thomas, Jeremy Stacey, they were very important in my development. And then moving forwards, guys like Jim Keltner, Brian Blade, people who sort of have a very distinct voice. I'm not a fan of the sort of homogenization that has been happening recently where everybody sort of sounds the same. I liked it when I could sort of really tell whose voice. Obviously, someone who's pretty much everybody's influence now, but Steve Jordan, I listened to a John Scofield record called Electric Outlet probably about 20 years ago, and that blew my mind. That changed a lot of things for me. So those are my sort of big drumming influences. When I was a kid, I already mentioned Charlie Watts, but the Stones were big for me. Dire Straits was big for me. And then I moved into singer-songwriter kind of sounds. But for me now, still people like Lewis Taylor, Omar, Bon Iver, I really struggle to get past. I just think they're so fantastic. Justin Vernon is a complete genius. And a lot of classical stuff too, so stuff without drums. Names escape me. Ryuichi Sakamoto, the film composer. Just things that make me think about music away from drums. They're big influences on me right now. A bit like playing drums in the first place, I kind of fell into it. I was in bands when I was at school, like 14, 15, 16. And one of the bands that I was in for a couple of years, and then I actually got fired from it. And that pulled the rug completely from under me, and it made me study. And I studied with a couple of guys, and one of them being Mark Roberts. And he asked if I could dep for him in this band, which was a band called Fiji, and it was Jamie Hintz, who is now The Kills. And from there, it just kind of snowballed, really. And it really is. If people ask me, how do you get a gig, or how did you get that gig? My answer very simply is, do a gig. Once you do one, something else will happen and something else will happen. I think even in this age of social media, word of mouth and people actually coming to see you do what you do is just as important, if not more important. If they like what they see, then maybe they can check out your social pages afterwards. But I just think word of mouth is still the key thing that we rely on. what sound am I trying to put across? Is it a very clean, glassy pop sound? Is it slightly darker, more complex? Do I want the cymbals to sit underneath certain frequencies? With Kylie, for example, people are often surprised the hi-hats that I use are much darker than you would imagine. Oftentimes, companies will put out a range and they'll say, this is for pop music or this is for rock music. But the beautiful thing about Agop is that they have cymbals for everything, but they have cymbals that you wouldn't necessarily think would work. So with Kylie, I'm using a pair of 15-inch Mantra hi-hats. And they're not the darkest ever, but they're certainly not bright and glassy. And for dance music and electronic music, they just sit perfectly within that mix. When I'm playing with Will Young, I want something a little bit more, again, delicate might be the wrong word, but something that doesn't sort of kill the vocalists. So that I can dig into it when I have to, when the music demands, but it's not going to take anyone's heads off. I remember a friend of mine was talking about a singer that they worked with, and the drummer had recently changed, and he said to me that the singer is now no longer afraid of the drummer. And I think that's a scenario that I never want to be in, where you know, the volume or just, you know, the actual instruments that I'm playing are terrifying the singer or taking away from the music. So for me, it's always about what am I trying to put across, and sometimes there is an element of what kind of venues I'm playing. If it's a smaller venue, if we're very much on top of each other, if there's open mics everywhere, then again, I'll play something a little bit thinner, a little bit more buttery, darker sounding, and that way it just won't take everyone's heads off. Absolutely, the first and foremost and most important thing is to play with other people. We're currently in a society where it seems to be okay to just play in your bedroom or your studio, whatever it is, put things out, get likes, and not really ever have to interact with other musicians. I think any young person coming up absolutely needs to understand what it's like to play with, play for musicians and artists. You know, we play, and if we're in a practice room and we're creating something, we think, oh, this is fantastic, this is amazing. And you go to play it, and someone turns around and says, oh yeah, it's good, but maybe just don't do it. We need to make sure that our egos don't get in the way of the music. We need to serve the music. The music tells us what we can and can't play. And if we spend so long in our practice room on our own, just playing drums, in my case, playing drums for drum's sake, it defeats the purpose for me. So the most important thing, the only piece of advice that I can give is go and play with people. And it goes back to what I said earlier. If you do a gig, that will spawn another gig and another gig and another gig, and people will hear what you're doing, and they'll also know that you're capable of working with other people. They'll talk to other people. They say, how was it working with blah, blah, blah? And they'll say, oh, it's fantastic. He or she was really easy to work with, or not, or whatever it is. But these are all learning curves. And, you know, we're kind of missing a vital step, I think, right now. So yeah, for any up and coming, go and play with as many people as possible. And if there aren't venues as such where you are, create your own venues. Go and find somewhere a little left field or unexpected and create a music night. Just go and play as much as possible. Istanbul Agop, for me, it's There are a few reasons. First and foremost, the cymbals are, in my opinion, the best that there is. They cover everything, absolutely everything, from the pop sound of the Exist range. I say pop, I don't mean that. Maybe more contemporary, modern sound of the Exist to the darker, more complex of the Agop signature, and everything in between. I play and have pretty much all of the ranges, and they're incredible cymbals. Just from what we've been doing today, it just reminds me how beautiful they actually are. So that's the first and most important reason. Secondly, everybody is just a joy to work with, and they're pulling in the same direction. They care about their instrument, they care about the artists, and wherever I go, I know that I'm covered and they have my back. The guys at BR, we've been working together probably 10 years, maybe a little bit more now, and that relationship means a great deal to me, and that's why, you know, there's lots of stuff out there, but it's Istanbul, the cymbals, and Istanbul, the people, and the people surrounding them, it's just the best. There's no reason for me to be anywhere else at all, ever, full stop, period, done. Desert Island cymbal is the first cymbal that Barry at BR showed me. It's the 25th anniversary 20.5-inch ride cymbal. And it was the cymbal that I said to Barry, if I can have that, I'm all yours. It's just a beautiful, beautiful ride cymbal. It crashes really nicely. It just works for pretty much everything. Practice is as and when I can. The last year or so, I've been in a sort of creative, a really good creative place. For a while, it was more about maintenance, just making sure that my hands and feet worked. But with my family and working, I can't always practice. But I think one thing that's important to remember, again, especially for the younger guys coming up, remember why you practice. You practice in order to get work. You practice to make music. You practice to gig. And if you get to a point where you've practiced and people want to work with you because your practice is paying off, then enjoy that and don't stress about the fact that I haven't got time to practice, because there's ways that we can, you know, grab 10 or 15 minutes here and there, bring a pad with you, but thinking and listening to music, thinking about and listening to music, in some ways, is as important. That's what's going to inspire you. That's what is going to make you want to get onto the drum kit and work on certain things. But for me, if I can get maybe an hour or two, 3 or 4 times a week, then I'm happy with that. When I was coming up, I was doing 4 to 6 hours Monday to Friday. But practice is something that is often talked about and is rarely understood. For me, practice is a little bit like revising for exams. There's absolutely no point in trying to cram and revise everything all at once. So I developed a system whereby I would take components of my practice, components of my playing, and I would subdivide those up into the various points. So hands might be the different dynamic motions, whether it's straight motion or molar motion. It would be singles, it would be doubles, it would be rudiments, it would be, you know, that kind of stuff. And I wouldn't try and do all of that every day. I'd say, you know, I'd split it up. So Monday would be a couple of those components, and then it would be something to do with the feet, and then it would be something to do with musicality. And but also, I learned quite late, but early enough that it was useful. The brain can't really concentrate for much more than 45 minutes at any given time. So again, there's no point trying to do those 3, 4, 5, 6 hours all in one go. You've got to do it in bite-sized chunks. And as long as you're doing something every day, you will see progress. I've been very lucky. So I think Kylie headlining Hyde Park in 2015 was an incredible moment. In fact, that is the moment, and not necessarily just because of playing Hyde Park, which is a joy and a thrill in itself, but my daughter, who was 3 at the time, she came, and I remember playing the encore and looking to my right and seeing my wife and my daughter side of stage. Ellie had the sort of kids' headphones on, and she was, you know, in her mum's arms and dancing. And to me, that's what it's all about. If I can give her those moments to see what happens and, you know, just how exciting it all is, then I'm winning. But you know, that I think is probably the moment. But you know, being able to do things like the Hollywood Bowl or the Harlem Apollo, or doing all the late night TV shows in the States that you see and you dream of doing. I've been very lucky to do a lot of things. So yeah, I'm a lucky boy. Also Hyde Park, but Hyde Park 2018, we'd sound checked very early in the morning, and I hadn't realised that they were powering down, and we were rehearsing for 2 shows. We were rehearsing for the Hyde Park show, and we were rehearsing for the tour. And so I had 2 different show files in my DTX 900 module, and when the PAL went back on, unbeknownst to me, it defaulted back to the tour set list. So we're live in front of 80,000 people, live on BBC radio and the red button. And it's all good. We play the first song and I'm thinking, this is going to be great. And I patch change and I look down, it's completely the wrong song. And it's a segue, so I didn't have time to do anything about it. So my heart sinks, and I'm playing, wrong sounds, you know, just playing the parts, but with the wrong sounds. And as soon as that song was done, I just had to get on the talk back and say, Christian, who's our R&D, I'm gonna have to reload the machine. And it was probably the longest 90 seconds of my life. And Kylie is just an extraordinary professional, and she made it pretty seamless. But yeah, that was a difficult 90 seconds. The rest of the gig was fantastic, but just that moment where your heart sinks, you go, there's nothing that I can do. Nothing that I can do. It's the wrong song. Haven't got time to find anything else. We just got to deal with it. But I watched it back when I got home, and actually we got away with it.